The developmental psychologist Jean Piaget pointed out that in a fairly large subset of adolescents, those who are maybe further along the cognitive distribution, so a little bit of intellectual horsepower to spare, they go through what he described as a messianic phase in late adolescence. And what that would mean anthropologically is that there's going to be a subset of bright kids who they removed themselves from dependency on their parents. They've socialized themselves into the peer group, but now they're looking to take their place in the broader world, conceptually and practically. And there's a philosophical element to that. And the philosophical element, and this is the messianic part, is that they want to act ethically and do well at the highest level of striving. And so what we're offering them in our culture is the chance to play hero on the environmental preservation front. And so that satisfies that need, which is a real need, but it also does it in a very false way and this is one of its attractions. Just like you can oversimplify the industrialization issue, industrialization is bad, and all human impact on the planet is to be eschewed. You can simplify the moral issue, which is now if you're on the side of the planet, you're good and your moral duty has been done. Now that's absurd, but the thing is that people, let's say like you, who are promoting the radical middle, haven't elucidated a vision that's as compelling on the psychological side with regards to the fulfillment of that deep metaphysical need as the environmentalists who offer young people the opportunity to be planetary saviors just by waving around a placard. And this is a real problem. And it speaks to problems like the attitude in Germany that's anti-nuclear. Your sense is, well, that's irrational. And look at France, from whom the Germans import energy, by the way, who've managed a nuclear transition brilliantly and have energy to spare and at a low cost. Like, there's no logical reason there, but these so-called illogical reasons, they're real reasons and they're real impediments. And, one of the things I do believe that people found attractive about your talk and about the sort of things that, say, Bjorn Lomborg are doing is that a new sort of standard is being waived, which is something like, well, here's a better moral vision. How about we make everybody who's dirt poor rich as fast as we possibly can, and then we can have our cake and eat it too. We can serve the poor, which is like a classic left-wing orientation. And like I've been shocked, I've been shocked to the degree that the radical leftists will sacrifice the poor to the planet. Because I wondered when push came to shove, because there's two competing tendencies there, right? There's the green environmental tendency, fair enough, but there's everything should be done in service of the poor tendency. And what we've seen time and again in the UK and Germany and Canada, and around the world, is that if we had to choose between hypothetically serving the planet and helping the poor, we'll pick serving the planet in a nanosecond. And to hell with the poor. And that's not a vision that a lot of people find particularly attractive. I think you are offering an alternative to that.
Yeah, and I'll be extreme in this statement, but almost the elites have flipped. What used to be, the Republicans in the U.S. used to be sort of elite, if you will. And now they're working, I think, more with that next class than the Democrats are, the elite. It's almost flipped in a strange way. And again, that's an extreme characterization. Within those bodies, we have everyone. Okay, the whole spectrum. But I think you can have your cake and eat it too, as long as you don't try to eat the whole cake.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Well, that's the net zero problem.
Yes.
It's like, no, zero. Like,
yes.
No, net zero. That's the wrong measure. Mm-hmm. Like you can put that in your mind and you can remember it in a second. It's a nice cliche. Mm-hmm. But zero, it's like you're not thinking when it's zero.
Right. Well, it turns out when that report came out of the IEA a couple summers ago, I speak to a lot of boards and sit on several. I got a call from a CEO, and he said, "You got to come talk to my board this week." And so I did. I read it, and it was incredible, the assumptions that went into that. This was pre-Glasgow, okay? COP, I think it was 26 in Glasgow. They set up a framework in which there were a lot of crazy assumptions, but the craziest amongst them, Jordan, was this. that the energy consumption in the world would start to go down 2 years later, which is today. Down. Aggregate energy consumption in the world down in order to achieve that net zero. And there were a lot of other things. And I looked at that, and I made the figures, and I showed this wedge between, GDP and human population before we peak in 2080, et cetera. That's literally impossible. Okay. It won't go down. Now we can help lower the per capita consumption and therefore start to help things. Nobody challenged it. It became a roadmap for COP26. And I was with Dan Yergin. He was on our PBS show. And he said, Scott, you have to write this up. So I put out a little piece called The Road to Glasgow is Paved with Bad Assumptions, and it was. But we used it as a roadmap. I think this is one of the single more destructive, almost, too strong of a word, but destructive constructs that we're dealing with now is this concept of net zero. Now, admittedly, net means if you can capture some out of the air and atmosphere, that's part of net. So I could still emit as long as I'm offsetting by some level of capture. Net zero, not absolute zero. Important distinction. But we're not. Net zero is kind of this weird target that I think a lot of people have rallied around. We've got to begin to think beyond that and recognize, use an analogy. I want to run a marathon. I'm 64 years old. I want to run it in 4 hours, which I'll never do, but that's my goal. Let's say I run it in 4.5 hours, but I finish it. I achieved something big. It wasn't 4 hours. It was 4.5 hours. Maybe net 40 is okay. Or net 50 or net 30. We've brought down, but we haven't imploded the economic health and well-being of not just the poorest among us, but the whole global economy, which is starting to happen. Because if we do that, the environment's going to get crushed.
It's going to be irrelevant so fast that
look what Germany did.
You can't even imagine it.
It's not hypothetical anymore. Germany consumed more coal. They burned more coal when they needed to. And other economies will do the same thing when push comes to shove. Global leaders, say it again, prioritize energy security over climate security every time. So we've got to so young people, you asked the good question. How do you get them away from just that? We have to begin to think away from A, B. Okay? It's not an A-B linear like that. It's actually A-B-C. You can't jump from A to C, just to the environment. There's energy, there's the economy, and there's the environment, and it flows that way. Healthy energy underpins healthy economies. Healthy economies invest in the environment.